$3,400. That was the number glowing on my phone screen in the dim light of the parking lot. $1,200 for my father's mortgage supplement. $1,500 for my sister's children's enrichment activities. $700 for the emergency my sister texted me about on Tuesday. Sent. Gone. I turned off the screen. My reflection stared back from the darkened glass. 39 years old, senior forensic accountant, and currently hyperventilating in a Lexus while my 8-year-old son watched me from the back seat. The air outside was November sharp, the kind that bites your exposed skin. I could hear the low mechanical hum of the kitchen exhaust fans from Harlan and Oak Steakhouse 50 yards away churning out the smell of seared beef and money. Theo sat perfectly still. He was clutching his seatbelt strap with one hand and his backpack with the other. Inside that bag was Captain, the one-eyed teddy bear he had slept with since foster care. "Ready, buddy?" I asked. He nodded. He did not smile. He knew what kind of rooms we were walking into. He remembered last year. I opened the car door. The cold hit me first smelling of wet asphalt and dead leaves, then the smell of Theo's coconut shampoo as I helped him out. I took his hand. It was small and warm, and the only real thing in my life. We walked toward the entrance. My father Dale was already at the head of the table in the private dining room on the second floor. He held a glass of whiskey like a gavel. He did not look up when we entered. He looked at his watch. Not at me. At the watch. As if my arrival were a schedule deviation, not a reunion. "You are late, Nora. You are late, Nora." "Traffic," I said. Janine was next to him. My sister. She was wearing cream cashmere and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her husband Keith sat beside her, adjusting his cuff to show off a watch that caught the chandelier light. A submariner. New. I looked at the lugs. They were too thick. The finishing on the case back was slightly off. I audit assets for a living. I know what real money looks like, and I know what a desperate attempt to look rich looks like. That watch was a fake. I said nothing. "Sit," Dale said. He pointed to the far end of the table, near the service door. The draft from the kitchen hit my legs as soon as I sat down. Waiters brushed past my chair every 30 seconds. I scanned the room automatically. 3 windows facing Walnut Street. 2 exits. 1 security camera mounted in the upper corner, its red light blinking a slow, steady rhythm. I count things. It is what I do. I count assets. I count liabilities. I count the number of times my father looks at Janine's children, Madison and Bryce, and smiles. 7 times in the first 10 minutes. I count the number of times he looks at Theo. 0. We ordered. Dale ordered the tomahawk ribeye. $120. Keith ordered the Wagyu flight. $95. Janine ordered lobster thermidor. $85. They did not look at the prices. They did not have to. They knew whose credit card was in the pocket of the black blazer hanging on the back of my chair. I ordered salmon. Theo asked for pasta. While we waited, Theo opened his sketchbook. He drew quietly, his head bent low. Madison. My 12-year-old niece leaned over. "What is that?" she asked. Her voice was loud, sharp. "It is a sketchbook," Theo said. Madison smirked and turned back to her phone. She tapped out a message. Janine's phone buzzed on the table a second later. Janine looked at the screen, then at Madison, and they shared a look. A secret language of exclusion I had never learned to speak. The food arrived in a parade of silver platters. The smell of truffle oil and drawn butter filled the small room. Steam rose from the prime rib. The waiter placed a basket of bread on the table. He set down the side salads, the wilted greens, the things that came free with the meal. Janine waved a manicured hand toward our end of the table. "Just leave those down there," she told the waiter. "The bread, the salad, the free things." The Wagyu and the lobster stayed at the other end. Madison asked for more beef. The waiter served her. She chewed, looking at Theo. "This is so good," she said. "Have you ever even tried Wagyu?" Theo shook his head. He looked at his pasta. "Well," sweetie Janine said. Her voice was sweet. Poisonously sweet. "Wagyu is not really for everyone." "The boy has his pasta," Dale said. He cut into his steak. Red juice ran onto the white china. "That is plenty." Silence settled over the table, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, static-charged silence before a storm. I felt Theo's knee press against mine under the table. He was seeking an anchor. Janine picked up the breadbasket. She slid it across the tablecloth toward Theo. The wicker scratched against the starched fabric. A harsh, dry sound. "Here," she said. Then she looked at me. Her gray-blue eyes were flat, dead. Then she looked at me. Even from across the length of the table, I could see her eyes go flat. Dead. The air left the room. I did not blink. I did not gasp. My heart did not race. It stopped. It simply stopped beating for a full second. Keith chuckled. It was a nervous sound, the sound of a man who agrees but wants to pretend he doesn't. Dale kept chewing. He took a sip of whiskey. "You should have packed him something cheap," he said. "Didn't have to bring him to a place like this." I looked at Theo. His hand had stopped moving on his sketchbook. He went very still. It was the stillness of a child who has learned that being invisible is the only way to be safe. He put his pencil down. He did not cry. He just looked at the breadbasket. Something in my chest closed. It was not a break. It was a latch clicking shut. A heavy steel door that I had been propping open with my body for 14 years, begging them to walk through, finally slamming into its frame. The draft from the service door felt cold on my neck. I watched Janine pick up her wine glass. She looked satisfied. She thought she had put us in our place. She thought this was just another transaction where I paid the bill and she set the terms. "Noted," I said. One word, flat. No inflection. Janine blinked. She lowered her wine glass. She had been expecting tears. She had been expecting me to plead. She had been expecting the Nora who apologized for taking up space. Dale looked up from his steak. For the first time all night, he looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He saw something in my face he did not recognize. I signaled the waiter. "Check, please." The bill came on a small black tray. $10,247.83. I took out my Amex. I placed it on the tray. I did not look at the total. I knew the total. I always knew the total. I stood up. I took Theo's hand. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. We walked out. We took the elevator down in silence. We walked through the parking lot in silence. The wind had picked up, rattling the dry leaves across the pavement. I buckled Theo in. I got into the driver's seat. I started the car. "Mom." His voice was small, thin. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was hugging Captain. "Why do you keep paying for them?" he asked. I stared at the windshield. The city lights blurred into streaks of red and white. "I do not know, buddy," I said. "I think I just stopped." We drove home. I did not turn on the radio. I drove with a weight in my chest. Not a number yet. Something larger. 14 years of wire transfers and emergency calls at midnight piling up in a column I had never totaled. I did not know the sum, but I knew it would be a number that made me sick. The condo was dark when we got home. The heating unit clicked in the hallway. I put Theo to bed. I tucked the blanket around him. I kissed his forehead. He was asleep in 5 minutes. I went to the living room. I sat on the couch. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating the empty room. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I typed the header. Family Financial Support. 2010 to present. I logged into my bank account. I pulled the archives. I started with 2010. November 2010. Dale's property tax emergency. $4,200. June 2011. Janine's wedding contribution. $8,500. March 2012. Keith's business investment. $15,000. Never repaid. My fingers flew across the keys. The only sound in this condo was the rhythmic clatter of typing. I am a forensic accountant. I build cases. I find the money trail. I document what people want to keep hidden. And tonight, for the first time, the case was mine. Tonight, the case was mine. August 2014. Janine's credit card debt. $6,000. December 2015. Dale's roof repair. $12,000. The numbers stacked up, rows and rows of them. A monument to my own stupidity, a monument to my desperate, pathetic need to be useful. I added a column at the end. Acknowledged, I went back to the top. 2010. Number 2011. Number 2012. Number 1. I typed N. The letter repeated down the screen like a stutter. I reached 2019. I paused. The total at the bottom of the screen was already $341,000. I looked at the number. $341,000. I could have bought a house. I could have bought a college education. I could have taken Theo to see the ocean every summer for the rest of his life. Instead, I bought bread baskets and insults. I looked at Theo's door. It was slightly ajar. I could hear his soft breathing. I thought about the fake Rolex on Keith's wrist. I thought about the security camera in the restaurant. I thought about the way Janine smiled when she said the word leftovers. I did not close the file. I typed 2020. The Monday morning sun hitting the glass of my 38th floor office did not feel like a fresh start. It felt like an interrogation lamp. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My dual monitors hummed with the comforting binary logic of spreadsheets, but my phone lying face down on the desk was a chaotic mess of human entitlement. 11 missed messages since I walked out of the steakhouse on Thursday. I picked it up and scrolled through the timeline of panic. Friday 10:15 in the morning. Janine. Well, that was dramatic. Saturday 2 in the afternoon. Janine, are you going to apologize or should I tell Dad Sunday 6 in the evening, Dale? Call your sister. Monday 8 o'clock this morning, Janine. Keith said you were rude. We are family, Nora. I did not respond. I placed the phone back on the desk screen down. In 14 years, I had never not responded. I was the one who picked up on the first ring. I was the one who replied before they even finished asking for the money. My silence was a language they did not speak, and I could feel their confusion vibrating through the device. A pair of heels clicked rapidly against the tile floor of the hallway. Fast, rhythmic, aggressive. Suki. Suki Pham dropped into the chair opposite my desk without knocking. She was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill and holding a tablet like a weapon. You look like you fought a turkey and lost, she said. Thanksgiving, I said. Say less, she replied. She set the tablet down. How bad I looked at her. Suki was the only person at Deloitte who knew about the adoption struggles. She was the only one who knew I spent my weekends driving Theo to art therapy instead of going to brunch. My sister told my 8-year-old that adopted kids get leftovers, I said. At a dinner I paid $10,000 for. Suki went perfectly still. The sarcasm evaporated from her face. She leaned forward, her dark eyes locking onto mine. She said that. To Theo. And what did you do? I said, noted. Suki leaned back in her chair. She studied me for a long moment, tapping a manicured fingernail against the armrest. That is either the most zen thing I have ever heard or the most dangerous. I started a spreadsheet, I said. Okay, she said. It is the second one. I turned to my monitor. I brought up the file I had started Thursday night. I had worked on it all weekend. I am only through 2019, I said. $341,000. Suki did not flinch at the number. We deal in fraud. We deal in embezzlement. We see numbers that ruin lives every day. But she looked at me differently. What are you going to do with it? She asked. I do not know yet. Fair, she said. She stood up, smoothing her blouse. But Nora, you are not building a spreadsheet because you are curious. You are building a case. I did not deny it. Suki walked to the door, then stopped. Just make sure you know who the defendant is. She left. I was alone with the hum of the computers and the silence of my phone. An hour later, Ellen Mayer walked in. Ellen was the managing partner. She did not make small talk. She walked in, dropped a thick manila folder on my desk, and kept walking toward the window. New engagement, she said. Wexler and Rowe, King of Prussia, manufacturing. Their board requested an independent forensic review. They found some irregularities in vendor payments. I opened the file. The cover sheet was standard. Company overview. Board of directors. Executive team. My eyes scanned the list. CEO Phil Wexler. COO David Rowe. CFO Keith Barrett Kiley. My hand stopped moving. I read it again. Keith Barrett Kiley. My brother-in-law. The man who wore a fake Rolex to Thanksgiving dinner. The man who laughed when his wife told my son he deserved scraps. I stared at the name. I should recuse myself. That was the ethical call. The Certified Public Accountant Code of Conduct is clear about conflicts of interest. I should stand up, walk to the window, and tell Ellen that the chief financial officer is married to my sister. She would reassign the file. Someone else would handle the audit. I looked at the phrase irregularities in vendor payments. I knew what that meant. I have spent 15 years finding out what that means. It means someone is stealing. If I recused myself, another auditor might miss it. Keith is lazy, but he is charming. He knows how to talk to men in suits. He would buy them a steak dinner laugh about market volatility and explain away the discrepancies as clerical errors. But if I kept the file, I turned the page. I looked at the preliminary data. The vendor list. 2 vendors stood out immediately. Both had post office box addresses. Both were receiving payments of $8,000 to $12,000 every single month. My fingers tingled. It was the same sensation I got when a column did not balance. The numbers were talking to me. I picked up my desk phone. I dialed an internal extension. Suki picked up on the second ring. Start talking, she said. I need you to run something for me, I said. Quiet. How quiet? Don't log it, quiet. There was a pause on the line, then the sound of typing. This about Thanksgiving, she asked. This is about a vendor payment pattern that does not make sense. Those are my favorite kind of vendor payments, she said. Send it. I wrote the 2 vendor names on a sticky note and walked it to her desk. Alpha Logistics, LLC, and Keystone Supply Partners. I waited. The office air conditioner hummed. Ellen had left the room 10 minutes ago, but I hadn't moved. My computer pinged. Suki appeared in my doorway 20 minutes later. She closed the door behind her. She put a piece of paper on my desk. Both limited liability companies were formed in the last 3 years, she said. Alpha Logistics uses a registered agent at a UPS store in King of Prussia. And the other one, I asked? Keystone Supply Partners. Registered agent address is 47 Winding Creek Lane, Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. I froze. I knew that street. Winding Creek Lane. It was my father's street. 47 was not Dale's house number. Dale lived at 53, but 47 was 3 houses down. It was too close to be a coincidence. It was a geographical anchor. Keith had registered a fake company using a neighbor's address to keep the mail close enough to intercept, but far enough to keep his name off it. I pulled the thread. I did not unravel it yet. I just held it between my fingers. So Suki said softly, "Are we telling Ellen?" "Not yet," I said. "Nora, not yet." Suki looked at the file on my desk. Then she looked at the personal laptop bag where I kept my own flash drive. The ledger. 2 spreadsheets, she said. 2 investigations. 1 family. She opened the door. "Good luck, Nora." I worked until 7. I did not go home to a warm dinner. I went home to a dark condo and a quiet child who was drawing pictures of a bear with one eye. At 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Dale. I looked at the screen. Usually seeing his name triggered a reflex. I would answer, grab my checkbook, and wait for the number. Tonight, I just looked at it. I picked up. "Your sister says you stormed out of Thanksgiving," he said. "No, hello. No question about how I was. Just the accusation." "I did not storm," I said. "I left." Same thing he said. His voice was thick. He had started drinking early. "You embarrassed her in front of the kids. She told my son he deserved leftovers because he is adopted." There was a silence on the line. I listened to his breathing. I waited. I waited for him to say that was wrong. I waited for him to say he was sorry he sat there and chewed his steak while it happened. "Well," he said, "you have to understand, Nora. It is different. Janine's kids are Pratt's. The boy is... Well, he is yours, but he is not." He trailed off. "Not what I asked. Not blood," he said. "You know what I mean. I am not saying it is right, but you can't expect the same treatment. Not blood." The words landed like stones. I looked at Theo. He was sitting on the floor coloring. He looked up at me and smiled. A small, tentative smile. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was the feeling of ice water in my veins. I let the silence hold for a beat. Then I changed the subject. "Anyway," I said, "I just want you to know I am fine. Financially, everything is stable on my end." The shift was deliberate. I wanted to hear what he would say about himself. "Good," Dale said. His voice changed instantly. It became lighter, relieved. "Good. I am too. Do not worry about me. Everything is fine here." He lied. I knew he lied because I pay his mortgage supplement. I knew he lied because I paid for his roof. I knew he lied because a man who claims he is fine financially does not let his daughter pay for a $10,000 dinner. Noted, I thought. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I sat at my kitchen island. I opened my personal laptop. I opened the spreadsheet. I added the year 2020, then 2021, then 2022. On my work laptop, the audit file for Wexler and Rowe sat open. One investigation into the past. One investigation into the present. Both roads led to the same house. Saturday morning arrived with the quiet gray light of early December. Theo was in the living room watching cartoons, the volume turned low. I sat at my desk in the corner of the bedroom. The spreadsheet was finished. 14 years of bank statements. 14 years of Venmo history. 14 years of checks written with a hand that shook slightly less each time until it became muscle memory. I looked at the final cell at the bottom of the screen. $487,342. I stared at it. Almost $500,000. I broke it down. I created pivot tables because that is how my brain organizes trauma. Dale's share was $214,000. Mortgage supplements. Car repairs for cars he did not need. Medical bills he claimed insurance would not cover. Cash for retirement help because he said his pension was not quite stretching far enough that month. Janine's share was $198,000. Contributions to a wedding I was barely allowed to speak at. Enrichment activities for Madison and Bryce. Piano lessons. Horse riding camp. A business investment for Keith 5 years ago that vanished into thin air. Monthly help. The rest was joint family expenses. Holidays. Vacations where I paid for the rental house and slept on the pull-out couch while Janine and Keith took the master suite. I scrolled to the column I had started on Thanksgiving night. Acknowledged. The one I had been filling in for weeks every time I added a new year. 487 individual entries. 14 years. I scrolled from the top. 2010. Property tax help. N. 2011. Janine's bridal shower deposit. N. Janine said the venue was smaller than she wanted. N, all the way down. Not one real thank you. There were generic cards, of course. form letters after the wedding, a mass text on Thanksgiving once. But not one moment where someone looked me in the eye and meant it. Not one moment where my father took my hand and said he appreciated me. I added a final column to the right, requested or expected. I ran the calculation. 73% of the money was expected. Monthly transfers, recurring bills. 27% was emergency requests. 0% was offered freely. I looked at the number again. $487,342. I could have bought a house with a yard for Theo. I could have fully funded his college account. I could have taken a year off to travel with him when the adoption was finalized, just the two of us learning how to be a family. I could have done anything. Instead, I bought 14 years of being tolerated. I saved the file. I named it The Ledger. Then I did something I have never done with my personal finances. I hit print. The laser printer hummed to life. Page 1 slid out, then page 2, then page 3. It took several minutes. 27 pages of evidence. I gathered the warm stack of paper in my hands. It had weight. It felt heavy like a book of judgment. This was a weapon. I did not know when I would use it. I did not know if I would have the courage to put it on the table. But it was built. Mom Theo appeared in the doorway. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Captain was tucked under his arm. "Can we get hot chocolate?" he asked. I looked at the stack of papers in my hand. Then I looked at my son. "Yeah, buddy," I said. I slid the papers into a manila folder and shoved it into the bottom drawer of my desk. "Let's go." Wednesday lunch was usually a salad at my desk, but Suki insisted we leave the building. We went to a cafe 2 blocks from Deloitte. The noise of the lunch rush provided cover. Suki did not waste time. She opened her laptop on the small bistro table. "I mapped the vendor payments for Wexler and Rowe," she said. She turned the screen toward me. It was a diagram of theft. Simple, clumsy, arrogant. 2 shell companies, Suki said. Alpha Logistics and Keystone Supply. Both have received monthly payments for 36 months. Total diversion is $128,400. She tapped a key. A new window opened. Bank records show the limited liability companies pay out to an individual named Greg Talley. "I know that name," I said. "That was Keith's roommate at Penn State." Suki nodded. "Classic frontman. He is the cutout. The money flows to Greg and then Greg moves it somewhere else. I am still tracking the final destination." She closed the laptop. But the shell companies alone tell us enough. $128,000 funneled through fake invoices over 3 years. That is not a clerical error. That is a pattern. "So what is the plan?" Suki asked. "Do we report to Ellen? Do we launch the formal investigation? We could be done in 6 weeks." "Not yet," I said. Suki put down her coffee. "Why not?" "Because the moment we flag it, Keith gets a call from the company lawyer. Then Keith calls Janine. Then Janine calls Dale. And suddenly I am the monster who destroyed the family. You are not destroying anything, Nora. Keith is. He stole $128,000. From his company," I said. "Not from family. They will not see it that way. They will see me attacking him." Suki leaned forward. Her eyes were hard. "Nora," she said, "you just spent the weekend confirming that you spent nearly $500,000 on people who fed your son bread and called him leftovers. And now you are protecting the man who stole from his own company because you are scared your family will be mad at you." I looked away. I looked at the line of people waiting for coffee. "It is complicated," I said. "It is not," Suki said. "You are not buying groceries, Nora. You are buying love. And the exchange rate is terrible." The words landed like a fist to the gut. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. Buying love. I had known it since I was 19. I had known it since I sat in a hospital cafeteria eating pudding alone while my father and sister sat with my dying mother. I had been paying the invoice on belonging ever since, and the bill never got smaller. "I need to do this right," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were cold. "If I report now, it is messy. If I wait, I have the complete picture." "You sound like you are building a case," Suki said. "I am." Suki nodded slowly. "Then I am your second chair." "But Nora." "Do not lose yourself in the numbers. The numbers are not the point." My phone buzzed on the table. A text message. It was Aunt Peg. "Haven't seen you since summer. Come for tea, I have something of your mother's. I drove to Doylestown on Saturday." Aunt Peg lived in a small yellow house that smelled of cinnamon and old paper. The kitchen wallpaper was peeling at the corners, and the herbs in the window needed watering, but it was the only house in the Pratt family where I did not feel like I had to check my credit score at the door. Theo sat on the living room rug playing with Peg's fat orange tabby cat. Peg poured tea into mismatched mugs. She was my father's younger sister, but they looked nothing alike. Dale was broad and imposing. Peg was bird-like, sharp-eyed, and moved with a nervous energy that settled only when she looked at you. "I heard about Thanksgiving," she said. "Dale told you I asked. Dale told me you were dramatic," she said. "Janine told me you ruined dinner. I called the restaurant and asked for the receipt. $10,000. I assume that was not Dale's credit card." "No," I said. Peg's jaw tightened. She set the teapot down with a clatter. "My brother is a fool," she said. "He always has been. Your mother held him together. When Linda died, he fell apart, and he has been making you carry the pieces ever since." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "He told me he is fine financially," I said. "I asked him. He said not to worry." Peg laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. "Did he tell you about the pension?" she asked. "What about it?" "It got cut," she said. 40%. 3 years ago. Some restructuring at the fund. He lost almost half his monthly income overnight." I froze. If his pension was cut 40% 3 years ago, then the money I was sending him was not a supplement. It was his lifeline. He was living entirely on my checks. "He didn't tell me," I whispered. "Of course he didn't," Peg said. "He is too proud to admit it, and too comfortable to change. He would rather take your money and pretend he is doing you a favor by accepting it." I looked into the living room. Theo was laughing as the cat chased a piece of string. "He needs me," I said. "He needs the money, but he can't treat my son like a human being." Peg reached across the scratched wooden table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was dry and thin like parchment. "He is scared, Nora. Small men get scared when they lose their power, and you have all the power now. You just don't know it yet." She stood up and walked to the counter. She picked up a wooden box. It was old. The hand-painted flowers on the lid were faded. The initials LAP were burned into the wood. Linda Ann Pratt. My mother's recipe box. "Before you go," Peg said, "your mother left this. She gave it to me the week before she went into the hospital. She said to give it to Nora when she needs it. She held it out to me. I think you need it now." I took the box. It weighed nothing. It weighed everything. I ran my thumb over the initials. I could almost smell my mother's perfume. Vanilla and rain. "Don't open it here," Peg said softly. "Take it home. When you are ready." I drove back to the city with the box on the passenger seat. Theo fell asleep in the back. I had the ledger on my computer. I had the audit file on my desk. And now I had a wooden box full of index cards. 2 weapons and a ghost. The plan was forming. It was sharp and cold and heavy in my chest. I looked at the box one more time before I turned onto the highway. I did not open it. The first 2 weeks of December were defined not by what was said, but by what I refused to hear. My phone became a museum of unrequited demands. For 14 years, my family had trained me to be a Pavlovian responder. They rang the bell, and I wrote the check. But now the bell was ringing, and I was watching it vibrate across my kitchen counter without lifting a finger. The first week, the messages were confused. Janine sent a text on Tuesday. "So, are we just not talking now?" 2 days later, "Madison has her recital next week. You usually cover the dress. It is $200. Then Dale. "My car needs an oil change. The place you used last time, what is it called?" He knew the name of the place. He wanted me to call them and give them my credit card number over the phone like I did last December. By the second week, the confusion had curdled into panic. "Janine, Monday morning. Keith lost a client. Things are tight. Can you send the usual Janine Tuesday afternoon?" "Hello, Dale, Wednesday. The heating bill came. It is higher than expected." "Janine, Thursday night." "Nora, this is ridiculous. One bad dinner and you disappear. You are punishing us." I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and read the scroll of grievances. They read like invoices. Not one message asked how I was. Not one asked if Theo was okay. Not one mentioned the words, "I am sorry." They skipped straight to the balance due. I did not respond. For the first time in my adult life, I let the silence stretch. It felt heavy at first, like holding my breath, but after a few days, it just felt like air. Work became my sanctuary. The binary nature of numbers was a relief compared to the messy, unpaid ledger of my family. In the middle of December, Suki pulled me into a conference room at Deloitte. She locked the door. She laid out the evidence on the mahogany table. It was beautiful in a terrible way. "I found the end of the string," she said. She tapped a printed flowchart. "We know about the fake invoices," she said. "Alpha Logistics and Keystone Supply. But I tracked the outflows from the shell companies. The payments go to Keith's college roommate, Greg Talley." "The front man," I said. "Right. But Greg keeps 5% and wires the rest to a property management company in Manayunk." I looked at the documents. The property management company managed a single luxury condo unit on Main Street. "Who owns the unit?" I asked. Suki slid a property deed across the table. "Keith Barrett Kiley." I stared at the name on the deed. It was dated 3 years ago. "He is not just stealing," Suki said. "He is hiding assets. He bought a rental property with stolen company funds, and the rent checks go into a separate account that Janine does not have access to." I felt a cold smile touch the corners of my mouth. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a technician finding the structural flaw that brings the whole building down. Keith was embezzling from his employer to build a golden parachute for a divorce he hadn't announced yet. "What is the total exposure?" I asked. Suki did the math in her head. 128,400 in fake vendor payments, plus 47,000 in undeclared rental income. "That is federal, Nora. The IRS does not play games." I looked at the deed. I thought about Keith sitting at the Thanksgiving table laughing as his wife humiliated my son wearing a watch he bought with stolen money while he secretly planned a life without her. "What happens when we report?" I asked. "Wexler fires him immediately," Suki said. "Their general counsel contacts the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Keith faces wire fraud charges, money laundering. Could be 5 years in federal prison. Maybe 10. 5 to 10 years. I imagined it. Janine alone. Madison and Bryce visiting their father through plexiglass. The collapse of the perfect suburban life they had built on a foundation of my money and Keith's lies. I should have felt conflicted. The old Nora, the one who drove 14 hours to fix flat tires and pay for roof repairs, would have felt sick. She would have tried to fix it. I felt nothing. I looked at Suki. "If this goes to court, will it hold?" Suki nodded. "It is airtight." I time-stamped the chain of custody. I closed the folder. "We wait," I said. "I will report it to Ellen after Christmas." Suki looked at me. "You are giving him one last holiday." "No," I said. "I am giving myself time to set the table." That night, the winter wind rattled the windows of my condo. I sat on the edge of Theo's bed. The nightlight cast stars onto the ceiling, spinning slowly. Theo was tucked in his small body, barely making a mound under the quilt. Captain was on the pillow next to his head. "Mom," he whispered. "Yeah, buddy. Why does Grandpa look at me different?" My hand went still on the blanket. I had spent years telling myself he was too young to notice. I told myself that if I paid enough, if I showed up enough, if I was useful enough, I could buy his way into their hearts. I was wrong. He had been noticing since he was 5. He just didn't have the words until now. Different how I asked. My voice was tight. Like he said, pausing to find the thought. He looks at Madison and Bryce, and he is looking at them. But he looks at me, and he is looking past me. Like I am the window, and he is trying to see outside. The image broke me. I moved closer. I took his hand. It was warm and real. Theo listened to me. He looked at me. His eyes were my mother's eyes. "Amber and Brown, you are my son," I said. "I chose you. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I drove 14 hours across 2 states to bring you home because the moment I saw your face, I knew." "But they don't," he said. "They do not get to decide who you are," I said fiercely. "Do you hear me? Nobody at that table gets to decide your worth. Not Grandpa, not Aunt Janine, not Madison." Theo was quiet. He traced the stitching on Captain's face. "Captain only has one eye," he said softly. "But he still sees everything." I felt tears prick the back of my eyes, but I did not let them fall. I squeezed his hand. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "He does." He closed his eyes. I stayed on the edge of the bed listening to his breathing slow until the small fingers around Captain's paw went slack. I walked into the kitchen. The condo was silent. I opened my laptop. I opened the ledger. The number at the bottom seemed to glow. $487,000. Then I opened my email. I typed Janine's name in the recipient field. I did not write a long apology. I did not explain why I hadn't answered the texts. I did not mention the money or the insults or the audit. "I will host Christmas Eve," I typed. "My place. 6 o'clock. Everyone." I read it once. I hit send. They would come. I knew they would come. They would think I had broken. They would think the ATM was open for business again. They would think everything was back to normal. They would come expecting the old Nora, the one who apologized, the one who paid. They had no idea. Janine called me 48 hours after I sent the email. She did not text. She called. It was the first time I had heard her voice in 3 weeks without the filter of a screen. I let it ring twice, watching the name dance on the glass before I picked up. "Nora," she said. Her voice was breathless, pitched high with a relief she was trying to disguise as magnanimity. "I am so glad you came around." Dad was worried. We all were. She did not say she was worried. She said Dad was worried. It was a classic deflection. "I am hosting," I said. I kept my voice flat. I did not offer explanations. "Right," she said. "Of course. It will be nice." Like old times. Like old times. The phrase hung in the air between us. She meant the times when I paid the bill and kept my mouth shut. She meant the times when the machinery of the family hummed along on the grease of my bank account. "I will bring wine," she said. "Keith has a nice Napa Cabernet he has been saving. He says it is a good year." "That is fine," I said. "I am handling dinner." "Oh," she said. There was a pause that had a price tag attached to it. "So how much should I budget for my share?" I stood in my kitchen holding the phone away from my ear. Janine had never asked that question. In 14 years of holidays, birthdays, and emergency dinners, she had never once asked what her share was. It was a test. She was checking to see if the ATM was back online. She was checking to see if the glitch had been fixed. "You do not need to bring money, Janine," I said. The exhale on the other end of the line was audible. "Right?" she said. Her voice dropped an octave, settling back into its natural, comfortable rhythm. "Of course. I just meant if you need help with the prep or anything." "I do not." "Okay then," she said brightly. "We will see you at 6. I hung up. I stood there for a long time. She thought I had folded. She thought the silence of the last few weeks was just a tantrum, a flare of temper that had burned itself out. She thought we were returning to the status quo. She had no idea that I wasn't setting the table for a dinner. I was setting the stage for a trial. On the 20th of December, the sky over Philadelphia was the color of a bruise. I stood in my office at Deloitte, looking out at the jagged skyline. On my desk sat 2 stacks of paper. To the left was the audit report for Wexler and Rowe. It was 47 pages long, bound in a standard blue cover. It detailed $128,400 in fraudulent vendor payments and $47,000 in undeclared assets. It was clinical. It was precise. It was a career-ending weapon pointed directly at Keith Barrett Kiley. To the right was the ledger. It was 27 pages. It was not bound. It was held together by a simple black binder clip. It detailed $487,342 of financial support extracted from my accounts over 14 years. One document was professional. One was personal. Both were evidence of theft. I ran my hand over the Wexler report. Ellen Mayer had signed off on it that morning. Present findings to the client on January 2nd, she had said. Let them enjoy their Christmas before the roof falls in. I had nodded. I had agreed. But I had printed a personal copy. I sat down and opened the ledger. I turned to page 12. 2016. The year I paid for the roof on Dale's house. $12,000. I remembered that day. Dale had called me in a panic. He said water was coming into the upstairs hallway. He said he didn't have the liquidity. I wrote the check within an hour. 2 weeks later, he bought a new set of golf clubs. Callaway, top of the line. I looked at the entry. Roof repair. $12,000. Acknowledged N. I felt a surge of power. It was a dangerous, intoxicating feeling. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards. I knew what they owed me. I knew what they were hiding. I knew the secrets they kept in the dark, and I had dragged every single one of them into the light of a spreadsheet. Nora. I looked up. Suki was standing in the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, her arms crossed. She was not smiling. You have that look, she said. What look? The look of someone who is about to do something very satisfying and very stupid. I closed the ledger. I am not doing anything stupid. You are mixing a personal grievance with a professional audit, she said. She walked into the room and closed the door. That is either genius or career suicide. Usually it is the second one. I am not presenting the audit at dinner, I said. I am following Ellen's timeline. The audit goes through proper channels on January 2nd. And that? She pointed to the black clipped stack of papers. The ledger is personal, I said. It is not work product. It is my bank records. It is my history. Suki pulled out a chair and sat down. She looked at the 2 stacks of paper. Then she looked at me. Just make sure you know why you are doing this, she said softly. I am doing it because it is the truth I said. Are you, she asked, or are you doing it to hurt them? I stiffened. Is there a difference? Yes, Suki said. If you are doing it for the truth, you present the facts and you walk away. If you are doing it to hurt them, you stay to watch the blood. They hurt Theo, I said. My voice was low. They made him feel small. I know, she said, and I hate them for it. But Nora, look at you. You are vibrating. You are not an accountant right now. You are an executioner. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I am a forensic accountant, Suki, I said. Cause and effect is all I have. They took. I documented. Now I am presenting the bill. Suki stood up. She reached out and touched the corner of the Wexler report. Just be careful, she said. When you drop a bomb on a house, you do not get to control where the shrapnel goes. I went home. That night after Theo was asleep, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent lights hummed. I looked at my reflection. My hair was pulled back. My blazer was crisp. I looked like the woman who built the case. I practiced the opening line. This spreadsheet represents 14 years of financial support I provided to this family. It sounded right. It sounded strong. It sounded like the voice of a woman who was done being a doormat. I am not asking for the money back. I am asking for you to acknowledge the cost. I watched my lips move in the glass. Then I saw it. A flicker in the eyes. A set to the jaw. It was my mother's face. Linda Pratt. The woman who never kept a ledger. The woman who smoothed over every rough edge my father created. The woman who died trying to keep the peace. I remembered the night she died. I remembered sitting in the hallway listening to Dale cry. He didn't cry like a man who was grieving a wife. He cried like a man who had lost his shield. Would Linda do this? Would she print out the debts? Would she shame her husband and daughter at Christmas? Or would she swallow the hurt smile and pass the potatoes? I knew the answer. She would have swallowed it, and it killed her. I leaned closer to the mirror. I am not you, Mom, I whispered. I cannot be the shield anymore. I turned off the light. The face in the mirror vanished into the dark, but the question stayed. Was I doing this for Theo? Or was I doing this to prove that I could destroy them if I wanted to? I walked down the hallway. I paused at Theo's door. He was sleeping on his side, one arm thrown over Captain. His breathing was soft and rhythmic. I am doing this for you, I thought. I am doing this so nobody ever looks past you again. But Suki's voice echoed in the quiet hallway. Are you staying to watch the blood? I went to bed, but I did not sleep. December 23rd, the day before the reckoning. I spent the afternoon transforming the condo. This was not my usual hosting routine. Usually I threw a tablecloth over the table and hoped for the best. Today I was building a set. I went to a boutique in Rittenhouse Square and bought crystal wine glasses. 8 of them, $50 each. I bought heavy linen napkins in a dark slate gray. I bought beeswax candles that smelled of nothing because I didn't want a scent to distract from the food. I had ordered catering. Prime rib, au gratin potatoes, roasted asparagus with lemon zest, a chocolate tart for dessert. It cost $1,200. I swiped my card without looking at the terminal. It was the last money I would ever spend on them. It was the closing cost of the transaction. By 6 o'clock the table was set. The candles were unlit, standing like sentinels in the center of the table. The crystal gleamed under the overhead lights. It looked perfect. It looked expensive. It looked cold. Mom. I turned. Theo was standing by the couch. He was holding his sketchbook against his chest. Are you nervous? He asked. I stopped. I had just moved the forks for the 3rd time. I was aligning the bottom of the handle with the edge of the placemat. Millimeter precision. Why do you ask? I said. He pointed at the table. You keep moving the forks. I looked at the table. He was right. I had been shuffling the silverware for 20 minutes. A little, I admitted. I walked over to him. Is that okay? It is okay to be nervous, he said seriously. Captain gets nervous too. He held up the bear. One black button eye stared at me. The other was just a stitched scar where an eye used to be. That is why I keep him in my backpack, Theo said. So he does not have to be nervous alone. The simplicity of it brought me to my knees. I knelt down on the hardwood floor. I was wearing the slacks I had picked out for tomorrow night, but I did not care. I pulled him into a hug. He smelled of coconut shampoo and crayons. His small arms went around my neck. He squeezed tight. He didn't know what was coming tomorrow. He didn't know about the ledger or the audit or the war I was about to declare. He just knew his mom was moving the forks too much, and he offered to help the only way an 8-year-old knows how. By telling me I wasn't alone. This was what family was supposed to be. Not a spreadsheet, not a balance sheet of who paid for what. It was this, the sensation of being held when you were scared. I pulled back and looked at him. "You are a good boy, Theo," I said. "You are the best boy." "I know," he said. He smiled. "Can I put Captain at the table tomorrow?" I looked at the perfect table, the expensive crystal, the slate gray napkins. Janine would hate a one-eyed bear sitting next to the prime rib. Dale would make a comment about toys at the dinner table. "Yes," I said. "You can put Captain right next to you." He ran off to his room to tell the bear the news. I stood up. I looked at the table again. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The prime rib was ordered. The wine was breathing. The ledger was sitting in the drawer in a manila folder waiting to be opened. I was ready. But as I looked at the empty chairs, imagining my father at the head and my sister at his right hand, I felt a tremor in my fingers. I wasn't scared they would reject the evidence. The evidence was irrefutable. I was scared of what would happen after the truth was on the table. When the shouting stopped, when the shock wore off, when you blow up a bridge, you can never cross it again. I blew out the practice candle. Smoke drifted up toward the ceiling, thin and gray. I went to the kitchen and checked the folder one last time. 27 pages. I closed the drawer. There was no turning back. The elevator dinged at exactly 5:45. I stood in the center of my living room. I had spent the last 2 hours curating the atmosphere like a museum exhibit. The beeswax candles flickered on the mantel, casting long dancing shadows against the cream walls. The air smelled of roasting prime rib and the sharp, woodsy scent of the expensive pine candle I had lit 20 minutes ago to mask the smell of my own anxiety. The table was set with the precision of a surgical instrument tray. Crystal glasses aligned, slate gray napkins folded into perfect triangles. My hand brushed against the handle of the kitchen drawer as I walked toward the door. Inside lay the manila folder. 27 pages. The ledger. I could feel its mass, a gravitational pull that seemed heavier than the wood and steel containing it. The door opened. Dale walked in first. He was alone. He wore his heavy wool coat, the one he had bought 10 years ago when he still had a job to go to. He did not carry a gift. He did not carry a bottle of wine. He carried only the expectation of being served. He looked around the apartment, his eyes skimming over the new decor, the expensive catering spread, and Theo sitting in the corner with his sketchbook. "Got any whiskey?" he asked. "It is on the sideboard," I said. He walked past me without making eye contact. Janine and Keith arrived a minute later. The elevator doors opened to a cloud of cold air and noise. Madison and Bryce tumbled out, glued to their phones. Janine swept in behind them wearing a white fur vest that I knew cost $300 because I had paid the credit card bill it was charged to last month. "Nora," she cried. She leaned in and kissed the air next to my cheek. "Oh, this is adorable. So cozy." She handed me a bottle of wine. The glass was cold from the December air outside. Keith followed her. He smelled of too much cologne, a musk that tried too hard to be masculine. He shook my hand. His grip was firm, practiced the handshake of a man who makes deals he cannot keep. "Hey, Nora," he said. "Place looks great." I looked at his wrist. The fake Submariner was gone. Tonight he was wearing a simple leather-banded dress watch. Smart. Or maybe just lucky. Theo did not get up from his corner. He had Captain sitting on the floor next to his backpack. He looked up, offered a small wave, and went back to drawing. Madison dropped her coat on the floor. Bryce stepped over it. We moved to the table at 6:30. I sat at the foot. Dale sat at the head. It was the Thanksgiving seating arrangement replicated in my own home, paid for by my own salary. I watched them eat. The prime rib was perfect pink in the center, encrusted with rosemary and sea salt. The au gratin potatoes were bubbling with Gruyere cheese. Keith talked about market challenges. He used words like volatility and headwinds. He sounded like a man who read the headlines of the Wall Street Journal, but never the articles. I watched him cut his meat. I thought about the $128,000 in fake invoices he had approved. I wondered if the steak tasted like theft. Janine swirled her wine. "So, Nora," she said. Her voice was light conversational. "I assume you got the kids' gifts sorted. Madison has been dying for that new iPad." The table went quiet. Forks clinked against china. "I got Madison and Bryce books," I said. Janine froze. Her wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "Books," she repeated. "Hardcover editions of the classics," I said. "And a sketchbook for Bryce." Silence stretched across the table. It was thick and uncomfortable. Keith chuckled nervously. "Huh. Well, that is practical." Janine set her glass down. It made a sharp click against the wood. Her jaw tightened. She had expected $500 worth of electronics. She had budgeted her own Christmas spending based on the assumption that I would cover the big-ticket items. "Your mother always gave books, too," Dale said. He said it with a tone of disappointment, as if literacy were a genetic defect I had inherited. Janine took a breath. She recovered her smile, but it was thinner now. Brittle. "Well," she said. "Speaking of budgets, I have been meaning to ask about the January check. Keith is between things right now." The bonus structure shifted. I picked up my water glass. The condensation was cold against my fingertips. "There will not be a January check," I said. The chewing stopped. All movement at the table ceased. Madison looked up from her phone. "What do you mean?" Janine asked. Her voice dropped the pretense of warmth. "I mean, I am not sending money anymore," I said. Dale put down his fork. He looked at me down the length of the table. "Excuse me," Janine said. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "After one Thanksgiving, you are cutting us off. Over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "You know what I meant, Nora. I was joking." "God, you are so sensitive. You told my son he deserved leftovers because he was adopted," I said. "That is not a joke. That is what you believe." "Oh, here we go," Janine said. She rolled her eyes. "The martyr act. You love this, don't you? You love holding it over us." "There is nothing martyred about this," I said. "It is financial." "Financial!" Janine's voice rose. "You want to talk about financial? You throw money around to control us. You always have. That is what this is. You are withholding to punish us because we didn't kiss your ring fast enough." I felt a muscle jump in my jaw, Nora Dale said. His voice was a gavel. He leaned forward, resting his heavy forearms on the table. "You have always been the responsible one," he said. "That is your role. You do not get to stop being responsible just because your feelings got hurt." "My role," I said. "Your mother." "God rest her soul would be ashamed of this," he said. "She held this family together. She did not keep score." The mention of my mother hit me like a physical blow. He was using her ghost to police my wallet. "She did," I said. My voice shook slightly. "And it killed her. And I have been doing it since the day she died. And I am done." "Come on," Keith said. He held up his hands, palms out. "Let's all calm down. Nora, you are being emotional. This is Christmas Eve." I looked at Keith. I looked at the man who had stolen $128,000 from his employer and was currently renting a secret condo in Manayunk. "I am being emotional," I asked. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I need a moment," I said. I walked into the kitchen. My hands were trembling. I gripped the edge of the counter and breathed. The smell of the prime rib was suddenly nauseating. I opened the drawer. The manila folder was there. 27 pages. The evidence of 14 years of exploitation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Suki. "Whatever you are about to do, make sure it is for Theo, not against them." I looked at the folder. I heard Janine's voice from the dining room. She wasn't whispering. She wanted me to hear. She will come around, Janine said. She always does. She needs us more than we need her. I closed my hand around the file. The paper felt cool and smooth. I walked back into the dining room. I placed the folder in the center of the table between the candles. I did not open it. Before I opened this, I said, "Does anyone want to say anything about Thanksgiving silence?" Dale poured more whiskey into his glass. The amber liquid swirled. Janine sighed a loud theatrical exhalation of boredom. "No," I said. "Okay?" "Actually," Janine said. She stood up. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with malice. She looked like she had been waiting for this moment all night. "I do have something to say." She unlocked her phone. "I called Child Protective Services this morning," she said. The room went cold. The air conditioning wasn't on, but the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in a second. "I told them about Theo's living situation," she continued. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. "I told them about a single woman working 60-hour weeks with an adopted child who is showing signs of distress. Signs of what I whispered. Withdrawal," she said. "Emotional issues. Unstable behavior. The school counselor agrees he is struggling." "You called the school?" I asked. My voice was barely a sound. "I am concerned," she said. "As his aunt." "You called CPS," I said, "on Christmas Eve. On my son." I looked at the folder on the table. The ledger. The numbers. The $487,000. It meant nothing. I had brought a spreadsheet to a knife fight. I had brought logic to a war of annihilation. They weren't attacking my money. They weren't attacking my pride. They were attacking the only thing that mattered. Dale looked at me. He took a sip of his whiskey. He made his choice. He aligned himself with the golden child just as he always had. "Nora, maybe it is for the best," he said. "The boy needs stability. He needs a family. 2 parents. You are alone." "I am his mother," I said. "You are a single woman who bought a child," he said. The words hung in the air. Bought. A. Child. It wasn't an insult. It was an eviction notice. It was a declaration that in his eyes Theo was not a person and I was not a mother. We were a transaction. A failed investment. I felt my knees give way. I grabbed the back of my chair to stay upright. The room spun. The candles blurred into streaks of light. "Mom?" The voice came from the living room. I turned. Theo was standing in the doorway. He was holding Captain. His eyes were wide and red. He had heard. He had heard every word. Madison whispered something to Bryce. "See, I told you he is not really a prat." Something inside me broke. It didn't crack. It shattered. I looked at the folder on the table. I couldn't open it. If I opened it now, if I showed them the money I had spent on them, I would just be proving Dale right. I would be proving that I thought money could buy loyalty. I reached out. My hand shook violently. I grabbed the folder. I pulled it off the table. The pages slid out, scattering onto the floor. "Get out," I said. Nora Keith started. "Get out of my home!" I screamed it. It was a sound I didn't know I could make. It tore at my throat. Janine smiled. It was a small, tight smile of victory. She had won. She had pushed the button that destroyed me. "Come on, kids," she said. "Daddy, let's go. She needs space." She gathered her coat. She herded Madison and Bryce toward the door. Dale stood up. He finished his whiskey. He set the glass down on my table. He walked past me without looking at me. Keith grabbed his jacket. "Sorry, Nora," he muttered. "Family stuff, you know." He shrugged. The door closed. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood in the dining room. The prime rib sat congealing on the platter. The candles burned steadily indifferent to the wreckage. 8 places set. 2 people left. The pages of the ledger lay on the floor around my feet like fallen leaves. Theo walked toward me. He stepped over the papers. He stopped in front of me. "Mom," he asked. His voice trembled. Did I do something wrong? I looked down at him. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I dropped to my knees. I pulled him into me. I buried my face in his neck, smelling the coconut shampoo and the terror. "No, baby," I sobbed. "You didn't do anything wrong. You never did anything wrong." I held him on the floor of the dining room while the candles burned down, realizing that for the first time in 14 years, I had absolutely nothing left to give. The digital clock on the microwave read 14 minutes past 2 in the morning. I sat on the couch in the dark. The only light came from the blue glow of my laptop screen and the street lamps outside filtering through the blinds I hadn't bothered to close. The condo was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping house, the heavy, suffocating silence of a crime scene after the police had left. On the dining room table, the prime rib sat on the platter where I had left it 7 hours ago. The fat had congealed into a white, waxy film. The slate-gray napkins were still folded into perfect triangles at the empty seats. I looked at the coffee table. The manila folder lay there. The pages inside were bent at the corners from when I had dropped them. I had put Theo to bed at 9. He had cried until he hiccuped, clutching Captain so tight I thought the seams would burst. I lay beside him, stroking his hair, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep until his breathing finally evened out into sleep. I stayed there for another hour, listening to the radiator hiss, terrified that if I moved, the reality of what had happened would crash down on me. Janine had called Child Protective Services. The sentence looped in my head. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was an action. She had picked up a phone, dialed a number, and tried to dismantle my life. I looked at my laptop screen. The file was open. The ledger. $487,342. I moved the cursor to the file name. I right-clicked. The menu dropped down. Delete. My finger hovered over the trackpad. It would be so easy. One click, then empty the trash. Gone. If I deleted it, I could call Janine in the morning. I could apologize. I could tell her I was stressed, that work was overwhelming, that I didn't mean to scream. I could send the January check. I could pay for the iPad. I could go back to being the sister who paid the bills and kept her mouth shut. If I went back, the war would end. Janine would call off the dogs. She would tell the social worker it was a misunderstanding. Theo would be safe. I stared at the word, delete. I thought about Suki's voice in the conference room. You are buying love, and the exchange rate is terrible. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just like Dale. Maybe I thought that if I inputted enough money into the machine, affection would come out the other side. I was an accountant. I believed in inputs and outputs. I believed that books had to balance. But my books had never balanced. I looked at the spreadsheet again. I didn't look at the money column. I looked at column F. Acknowledged. I scrolled down. 487 entries. 14 years of history. N. 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 The letter N repeated like a heartbeat monitor that had flatlined. I realized then that I wasn't angry about the money. I never really was. I was angry about the silence. I was angry that I had spent half my life waiting for a thank you that was never coming. I was angry that my father stood at my mother's funeral and called me useful, and I had spent every day since trying to prove him right. Usefulness is a currency that depreciates the moment you stop spending it. If I deleted the file, I would be teaching Theo that lesson. I would be teaching him that his seat at the table had a price tag. I would be teaching him that he had to earn the right to be treated like a human being. I moved the cursor away from delete. I closed the laptop. The room plunged into darkness. I sat there until the sky outside turned the color of a bruise. I didn't sleep. I just watched the light shift across the floor, waiting for Christmas morning to arrive in a house that felt entirely empty. At some point, I picked up my phone. I texted Aunt Peg. "Merry Christmas. I haven't opened Mom's box yet." She replied 3 minutes later. She was awake too. "Open it when you are ready, honey. There is no rush. She will wait for you." I put the phone down. I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. Theo. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I threw the prime rib into the trash. I cleared the table. By the time he walked in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the wreckage of the night before was gone. Christmas morning was gray. A wet snow was falling outside, turning to slush as soon as it hit the pavement. Theo sat at the kitchen table. He was eating dry cereal from a bowl. He was moving quietly, carefully, the way he used to when he first came to live with me, like he was trying not to disturb the air. I placed the wooden box on the table between us. "What is that?" he asked. "Something from Grandma Linda," I said. "Your mom." "My mom." I ran my hand over the painted flowers on the lid. The wood was smooth, worn down by years of my mother's hands reaching for a recipe. I lifted the lid. The smell of vanilla and old paper drifted up. Inside were dozens of index cards, tabbed and organized: chicken pot pie, apple butter, the cranberry sauce she made every November. Sitting on top of the cards was a cream envelope. It had my name on it. Nora. The handwriting was hers. The loops were wide and generous, the ink slightly faded. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. Theo abandoned his cereal. He slid his chair closer to mine. He leaned his head against my arm, reading over my shoulder. I opened the envelope. The letter was dated 20 years ago, 2 weeks before she died. I unfolded the paper. "My dearest Nora, if Peg gave you this, it means you need it. I know you, sweetheart. I know you are carrying too much. You have been carrying things since you were 12 when you stopped asking your father for help and started helping him instead." I felt a lump form in my throat, hard and painful. "I want to tell you something I should have said more when I could. You are not your usefulness. You are not what you provide. You are not the checks you write or the problems you solve." I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe. "You are my daughter. My quiet, fierce, stubborn daughter who built a science fair project about tidal patterns and cried when nobody came to see it. I came. I always came." Tears spilled over my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. "Dale is not a bad man, but he is a small one, and small men make the people around them feel small so they don't have to stretch. Do not let him shrink you, Nora. Whatever you are facing, and I know it is something, because Peg wouldn't have given you this box over a small thing, face it as yourself, not as someone's ATM, not as someone's problem solver. As Nora. I love you. I love whoever you have become. And if you have children by any means, in any way, I love them too. Already. Sight unseen. Mom. I let the paper drop to the table. I covered my face with my hands. The sob that ripped out of me was loud and ugly. It was the sound of a 19-year-old girl who had been waiting 20 years to be told she was enough. Theo climbed into my lap. He wrapped his arms around my neck. He didn't say anything. He just held on. He pressed his cheek against my wet face. "Who is the letter from?" he whispered. "My mom," I choked out. "She wrote it a long time ago. She sounds nice." "She was. She said she loves me." I looked at him. I looked at the dark curls and the eyes that watched everything. I picked up the letter. I read the last line again. "If you have children by any means in any way, I love them too." "Yeah, buddy," I said. "She does." We sat there for a long time. The snow fell against the window. The radiator clanked. Eventually, Theo hopped down. He walked into the living room. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I felt lighter. Not happy exactly, but clear. The fog of the last 24 hours was lifting. I followed Theo into the living room. He was kneeling by the couch. He was picking up his sketchbook, which had fallen face down on the floor during the chaos last night. He opened it to the page he had been working on at Thanksgiving, the drawing Madison had sneered at, the drawing he had protected with his body. He held it out to me. I took it. It was done in colored pencil. The lines were firm and pressed hard into the paper. At the bottom in block letters, he had written, "My family." There were 3 figures. On the left was a woman with brown hair and a blazer. Underneath, he had written Mom. In the middle was a boy with black curls, me. On the right was a bear with one button eye and a stitched scar. Captain. Behind them was a building that looked like our condo. Above them was a yellow moon and 5 lopsided stars. That was it. There was no Dale. There was no Janine. There was no Madison or Bryce or Keith. There was no table where we sat at the end. There were no leftovers. I stared at the drawing. I had spent 14 years trying to buy a seat at a table that was never mine. I had spent thousands of dollars trying to buy Theo a seat at that same table, terrified that without them, he would be alone. But my 8-year-old son, who had lost everything before he was 3, who held a one-eyed bear and saw the truth of the world, had already known better. He hadn't drawn them because they weren't his family. We were. Just us. And it was enough. It was whole. I looked at the drawing and the last chain snapped. I didn't need them to accept him. He didn't need them to accept him. We didn't need their permission to exist. I walked over to the coffee table. I picked up the manila folder. I smoothed the bent corners of the pages. I wasn't going to delete the ledger. But the purpose of it had changed. Yesterday, it was a weapon I wanted to use to hurt them. I wanted to use it to shame them, to make them feel the pain they had inflicted on me. Today, it was just the truth. It was a closing statement. I wasn't going to present it to get an apology. I wasn't going to present it to get a thank you. I was going to present it to show them why I was leaving. I picked up my phone. I dialed Janine. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was sharp, defensive. She was ready for a fight. "If you are calling to yell at me, save it," she said. "I stand by what I did. I have a duty to report concerning behavior." "We need to talk," I said. My voice was calm. It wasn't the flat, cold voice I used when I said noted. It wasn't the screaming voice from last night. It was the voice of someone who has already walked out the door and is just turning back to hand over the keys. "All of us," I said. "You, Keith, Dad." "Oh, now you want to talk?" Janine scoffed. "Now that you are scared." "New Year's Eve," I said. "Dad's house." 4 o'clock. "Why Dad's house?" she asked. "Why not your fancy apartment?" "Because I am not hosting you again," I said. "And I am not bringing my son near you." There was a silence on the line. She heard something in my tone that she couldn't place. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. "I want to talk one time," I said, "and then I want to be done." "Done," she repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means be there, Janine." I hung up before she could answer. I looked at Theo. He was watching me. "Are we going to see them?" he asked. "I am going to see them," I said. "You are going to go to Aunt Peg's house. She said she has cookies to bake." He smiled. He liked Peg. "Are you going to be okay, Mom?" I looked at the drawing in my hand. My family. The woman, the boy, and the bear. I knelt down and kissed his forehead. "Yes," I said. "I am going to be okay." I put the drawing in the bag with the letter and the ledger. I was ready for the end. The drive to Bryn Mawr took 40 minutes. The sky was a flat slate gray hanging low over the suburban sprawl. It was New Year's Eve, 4:15 in the afternoon. I pulled into the driveway of the split-level house I grew up in. The house looked tired. The paint on the shutters was peeling slightly at the corners. The landscaping, which my mother used to tend to with religious devotion, was overgrown. A string of Christmas lights hung haphazardly from the gutter, drooping in the middle. Janine must have sent Keith to put them up. It looked like a chore done by someone who did not live here and did not plan to stay. I sat in the car for a moment. I touched the leather bag on the passenger seat. Inside was the ledger. Inside was the letter from my mother. Inside was Theo's drawing. I did not have the audit report. That was safe on a server at Deloitte waiting for the sun to rise on January 2nd. I walked to the front door. It was unlocked. The smell hit me the moment I stepped inside. It was the smell of dust and dry, overheated air. It was the smell of a house where no one cooked anymore. I walked into the living room. Dale was sitting in his recliner, the one with the worn armrests. A football game was playing on the television with the volume turned low. Janine was pacing by the fireplace. She stopped when I entered. She was wearing jeans and a silk blouse, but she looked frayed. Her makeup was a little too heavy, covering the circles under her eyes. Keith stood by the window looking out at the dead lawn. He held a beer bottle by the neck. He turned when he heard my footsteps. He looked tired. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since Christmas Eve. There were no decorations inside, no tree, just the family photos on the mantel. I looked at them automatically. There was Janine at her wedding, radiant in the center. There was Dale holding newborn Madison. There was a group shot from a vacation in the Outer Banks. I was in the back row, half obscured by Keith's shoulder. I walked to the center of the room. I did not take off my coat. "Thank you for being here," I said. Janine crossed her arms. "Let's just get this over with," she said. I sat down on the edge of the coffee table. It was the only place to sit where I could look at all three of them. I opened my bag. I pulled out the manila folder. I opened it. I took out 3 stapled packets. I placed one in front of Dale, one in front of Janine, one in front of Keith. "What is this?" Keith asked. He didn't pick it up. "This is a financial summary," I said. "It details every dollar I have given this family since 2010. Dale looked down. He saw the cover page. He saw the number at the bottom. $487,342. His hand twitched. He reached for his glass of whiskey on the side table. Janine didn't look at the paper. She looked at me. Her lip curled. "What is this, an invoice?" she asked. "You are billing us now?" "No," I said. "It is a record." I opened my own copy. "Page 1 is the summary," I said. "But the details matter." I flipped the page. "I am counting everything I said." I kept my voice low and steady. Every mortgage payment I made for Dad. Every emergency car repair. Every check for the kids' enrichment camps. Every time Janine texted me at midnight needing money for something she called urgent. Janine picked up the packet. Her eyes scanned the pages. She saw the entries. Wedding venue deposit, $8,000. Credit card consolidation, $6,000. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "You kept track." "I am a forensic accountant, Janine," I said. "Tracking is what I do." "This is sick," she spat. She threw the papers back onto the table. "You are weaponizing your own generosity. You gave that money freely. We are family. You help family." "I did help," I said. "For 14 years. I pointed to column F. "Look at the column marked acknowledged," I said. Dale put on his reading glasses. He leaned forward. "Every entry is marked N," I said. 487 entries. All N. "What does N stand for?" Keith asked. His voice was tight. "No," I said, as in no thank you. "No thank, as in no acknowledgement. As in the check cleared and you went back to pretending I didn't exist until you needed the next one." The room went silent. The only sound was the radiator clanking in the corner. Janine's face flushed red. "So, you want a thank you?" she asked. "Is that what this is? You dragged us here on New Year's Eve to force us to say thank you?" "No," I said. "I dragged you here to tell you why I'm leaving." I stood up. I walked over to the fireplace. I picked up the photo of the Outer Banks vacation. I looked at myself in the background. "I didn't keep this ledger because I am angry about the money," I said. "I kept it because at Thanksgiving my son was told by his own family that he deserved leftovers." Janine opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And I realized, I said, turning to face them, that I have been the one eating leftovers this whole time. I have been paying full price for scraps of attention, Nora Dale said. His voice was rough. I am not done, I said. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had loomed so large in my life for 39 years. He looked smaller today. He looked old. When Mom died, I said I was 19. I stayed. I paid. I held this family together because she asked me to. I didn't go to grad school. I didn't travel. I didn't date. I worked, and I sent checks, and I drove to every holiday, and I sat at the end of every table and I smiled. I took a breath. I am done smiling. I am not doing this to punish you, I said. I am doing this so you understand what you had, and what you are losing. Dale stared at the papers on his lap. He ran a hand over his face. Your mother, he started. He stopped. He cleared his throat. Your mother would have wanted us to be together. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the cream envelope. Mom wrote me a letter, I said. Before she died. She gave it to Aunt Peg. Dale's head snapped up. I held the letter. I didn't read it aloud. It felt too private. It felt like something that belonged only to me and Theo. She told me I am not my usefulness, I said. She told me not to let small people shrink me. Dale's jaw tightened. He knew. He knew Linda meant him. He looked down at his hands. He didn't apologize. He couldn't. The architecture of his pride wouldn't support it. I did the best I could, he muttered. I know, I said gently. It wasn't enough. For Theo, it wasn't enough. Janine stood up. She was shaking. So what she said. You are cutting us off. Over money, over respect, I said. Over my son, over a breadbasket. You will regret this, she said. Her voice rose shrill and desperate. You will come back. You always do. You need us. You have nobody else. I reached into my bag one last time. I pulled out the sketchbook paper. I held it up. The drawing was simple. 3 figures. The woman, the boy, and the bear. My family. I don't need you, I said. Janine stared at the drawing. For a second, just a flickering second, I saw something cross her face. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. An 8-year-old boy had drawn the truth, and she saw herself absent from the page. She looked away. She grabbed her purse. Whatever she said. Keith, let's go. She is crazy. Keith moved toward the door. He was pale. He had been staring at the spreadsheet, but he hadn't been looking at the family numbers. He had been looking at the formatting. He had been looking at the precision of the dates and the categorization of the funds. He recognized the work. Keith, I said. He stopped. He didn't turn around. Before I go, I said, a piece of advice. He froze. If someone in your position, I said, choosing my words with the care of a surgeon, had irregularities in their vendor payment records, they would want to get ahead of it. Before January. The silence that followed was absolute. Keith turned around slowly. His face was gray. Janine looked at him. She frowned. What is she talking about? Keith swallowed. Nothing, he said. It is nothing. It is not nothing, I said. But it is not my story to tell. The audit will tell it. Audit, Janine asked. Her voice sharpened. What audit? Keith stepped back. We are leaving, he said. Keith, Janine said. She grabbed his arm. What audit? I said we are leaving, he shouted. He pulled his arm away. Janine looked at him. She looked at his terror. She looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. She had spent a lifetime caring about appearances, and she knew exactly what it looked like when the facade cracked. Keith Barrett Kiley, she said, low and dangerous. You look at me right now. What did you do? I watched them. I watched the foundation crumble. I didn't present the report. I didn't break my ethics. I just opened the door and let the truth walk in. I picked up my bag. I am going now, I said. They didn't hear me. Janine was screaming at Keith. Keith was trying to back out the door. I looked at Dale. He was still sitting in his chair. He was holding the 27 pages of the ledger in his lap. He looked lost. Dad, I said. He looked up. His eyes were watery. I spent 20 years trying to be useful enough for you to love me, I said. Mom was right. I am not my usefulness. I walked to the door. Nora, he whispered. I didn't stop. I walked out of the house. I walked into the cold gray afternoon. I got into my car and I drove away. I didn't look back at the peeling paint or the drooping lights. I didn't look back at the house that had been a cage for half my life. I drove straight to Doylestown. I picked up Theo. He was covered in flour and smiling. We drove home to the city. At 8 o'clock, the condo was quiet. I was in the kitchen. I wasn't making a roast. I wasn't making a feast. I had a pan on the stove and a stick of butter. Theo sat at the counter. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Captain was sitting on the stool next to him. I flipped the grilled cheese sandwich. It sizzled. The smell of toasted bread and melting cheddar filled the kitchen. It smelled like safety. Theo hopped down. He opened the silverware drawer. Mom, he asked. Yeah, buddy. Does the napkin go on the plate or next to it? I looked at him. I looked at the way he held the paper napkin with such seriousness. Wherever you want, I said. I want it folded like a triangle, he said. Then fold it like a triangle. He carefully folded the paper napkins. He placed one next to his plate and one next to mine. Are we still going to see Grandpa? He asked. I took the sandwiches off the heat. I slid them onto the plates. I cut them diagonally just the way he liked. I don't know, Theo, I said honestly. Maybe. Someday. But right now, it is just us. And Captain, he said. And Captain. And Aunt Peggy, he added. And Aunt Peggy. That is a lot of people, he said. I smiled. I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the stove. He was right. It was a lot of people. It was exactly enough people. I checked my phone on the counter. The screen was dark. No messages from Dale. No messages from Janine. For the first time in 14 years, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. I put the plates on the table. I poured 2 mugs of hot chocolate. We sat down. I turned on the television. The New Year's Eve countdown had started. The crowd in Times Square was cheering. Can we stay up till midnight? Theo asked. It is New Year's Eve, I said. Of course. We ate our sandwiches. We drank our chocolate. Theo drew in his sketchbook. At 11:59, I pulled him onto the couch next to me. 10, 9, 8. Theo held Captain up to the screen so the bear could see. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, Mom, he said. Happy New Year, Theo. I pulled him close. He rested his head on my shoulder. He was small and warm and heavy with sleep. Outside, fireworks exploded over the Delaware River. Inside, the only sound was the breathing of my son. The audit would drop in 36 hours. The phone would ring. The lawyers would call. The storm would come. But tonight the ledger was closed.